All right, this is Chat ETD, and I want to talk about ex-players as pundits and the influence that they have. It's come to my mind because I was watching Stick to Football, which is the podcast with Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Ian Wright, Carragher, and Jill Scott on it, and they were talking yesterday. Jill Scott said that she was listening to or watching a game, and Seshko missed a chance. And I don't know who she's referring to, but somebody had said, "Oh, back in the day we'd have had Van Nistelrooy or Van Persie or Cantona or Andy Cole burying that." And she said it's not comparable. You're not. He isn't those players, and it puts an awful lot of pressure on him. And of course, I think that's true. I think in isolation, that's true, and it prompted a conversation about ex-players as pundits. Just to pick up on something there, she also said, these players aren't going to be going and winning Premier Leagues and doing all the things that you achieved. No, I'm sorry, that's a problem, because if you're spending nearly £70 million on a striker, the aim surely has to be that at some point in the not too distant future, you are challenging for Premier League titles. Are we just spending £70 million on players to finish sixth? So that in itself is a problem. But I agree with what she said about the pressure and the expectation that would put on a player, potentially. So it led to a conversation, and I know that Gary Neville, amongst fans, is subject to a lot of chat. And I mean, I can't remember if it was on here or another YouTube channel where I read a comment which just I was flabbergasted by, where someone had said, Gary Neville and people like him are the worst thing around this football club. They're the biggest problem for this football club. That's mind-blowing as a statement. So, not the Glazers, not the £1 billion of debt that we're in, not the 20 years of abject neglect and racketeering dressed up as football ownership, not Ineos that have come in the last 2 years and overseen a stinking pile of shit. Not that. No, Gary Neville. He's the worst problem. Utterly ridiculous statement. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but that's mine in response to it. And they had a good chat about it. I thought it was quite interesting, actually, and that they acknowledged it is pressure to have ex-players who've achieved a lot as pundits. And, obviously, that does put, I suppose it is a shadow on the players. But do you know what? As a player at Man United, if you come in and you don't think you can deal with that, because you're going to get that is going to happen. Whether you think it's right or wrong that ex-players have their say, and they're pundits, whether you think that's right or wrong, it's going to happen. So if you don't think you can deal with that, then you shouldn't play for us, because that's going to happen. So you've got to look at it as there's things that are within your control, and there's things that are out of your control. But if a player says something about you, the way you deal with that is what's within your control. You can't help what they say. You can try and perform better, which I'm sure everybody is doing. But you can't help that they're going to say something, because they are going to say something. They're paid to say something. It's their jobs. What are they supposed to do? Say he played fantastically well today, when he didn't? What are they supposed to say? This manager's going to win Premier Leagues with Man United, when he clearly isn't? What are they supposed to say? This is fantastic football, when it's not? I don't hear them get personal. I don't hear them say anything outrageous that a lot of us aren't already thinking. I don't. And if they were constantly harking back to, like Jill Scott said, oh, when Van Nistelrooy was here, he'd have scored. And Keane does that sometimes, but Gary Neville doesn't really do that, I don't think. Or if he does, he qualifies it. So it's par for the course. It's what's going to happen, but it uncovers yet another issue at United for me, in that all we hear around the club as mitigating circumstances and reasons for our failure is what the challenges are for a modern day Man United player, or what the challenges are at Manchester United. But nobody within the club seems to be able to find any solutions to these challenges. Now, isn't that what highly paid executives are supposed to do? Is find solutions, or find people who can come in and then find solutions. I go back to what I've said about young players recently who've come through the system. And I've rhymed off Rashford, Greenwood, Garnacho, Sancho, who's a young player that we brought in, and I think Mainoo's 50-50 in terms of whether he's going to make it at United or not. All players who came in with a big reputation, and 2 of them FA Youth Cup winners, by the way. And in Greenwood's case, like a generational talent, all players who have ended badly. And I've said, if you continually see a problem and there's a pattern, it's up to you as a club, it's your duty of care to go and try and solve that problem. But I just see a churning out of the problem over and over and over again. Why isn't there any innovation? Why are we not employing expert, whether it be psychologists, mentors, people that come in and help these young players? And part of that might be that when you make it into the first team, the glare of the world is going to be on you. The glare of ex-players who've achieved an awful lot is going to be on you. This is how we advise maybe you cope with that. Maybe that's happening, but if it is, it's not working, is it? But going back to the ex-players, as I said, what do you want them to say? And moving forward, the removal of challenge will never help anyone get better at something. Helping them overcome that challenge will. So the challenge here that's out of their control is the pundits. The pundits, and I don't doubt it is challenging, the pundits who are ex-players who have a shitload of medals that they've collected down the years, who have standards up there, which isn't a problem, by the way, for me, that they've got standards up there. They're calling out what they see. I don't doubt that that's challenging, and I don't doubt that that's pressurising. But the removal of that is not the solution here. Helping players cope with it is the solution. All United do is moan. And there's no innovators within the club. There's no leaders within the club. Because this has been going on for years now. And Neville said something that I thought really resonated with me in terms of big characters being around the club and you know, the glare of the world being on the club. In the 80s, when Ferguson came in, Matt Busby had an office at Old Trafford. I know that in the 70s he was quite an overbearing presence, but Ferguson didn't see it that way. You've got to embrace that. And again, or if you can't embrace the past of a club like Man United when you come into it, you shouldn't join it. Because I think it was Keane said, Real Madrid would be the same as that. Barcelona would be the same as that. AC Milan would be the same as that. You're standing on the shoulder of giants. That's what young people, when they come into the club say, isn't it? It's my dream club. When you look at what the club's achieved, we need to bring them back to the glory days. You're happy to use it as a positive when you first move in to United. But if you can't cope with it, first of all, you shouldn't probably join if you don't think you can cope with it. But secondly, if it's more than you thought it would be, then we need people to come and support these kids and these players. To deal with that, it's not up to the pundits to start telling lies about performances in order to wipe their arses. And the last thing this group needs and the last thing this club needs is to be told it's better than it is. It needs holding to account. It needs accountability and responsibility, and there is a severe lack of it throughout the club. Moving on to something else they spoke about, which I thought was really short-sighted actually. Gary Neville said he thought the two names he put forward for longer-term manager, Ancelotti and Tuchel. For someone who I think at times speaks a lot of sense, I think that's an absolutely nonsensical statement for a few reasons, some of which I've already said on here, but for people that haven't watched my previous videos, I'll just go through it. The two of them are in the World Cup, and they're both probably, or certainly would hope, to get to the latter stages of the World Cup. So when are they going to be able to start? When are they going to be able to be involved in conversations about squad development when they're preparing a team for a World Cup? Are they going to? So Ancelotti's 67 years old, and he's in the World Cup with Brazil, who will, I would say, at least get to the quarters or the semi-finals. So then is he not having a summer off at 67 years old? Well, I think he needs one, doesn't he? Tuchel's a lot younger, But is he not having a summer off? It's an incredible suggestion when you look at it like that. Secondly, as I've said before, those two are managers. They're not head coaches. We've just seen that they basically sacked a manager over an argument as to whether he's a manager or a head coach. The top and bottom of it is that. They've sacked him because of dynamics around whether or not he's a manager or a head coach. And in his last press conference, he said very clearly, I've come here to be the manager of Man United and not a head coach, and the morning after he was sacked. So Carlo Ancelotti, with his pedigree in the game, is not going to be a head coach at Manchester United. He's going to be a manager. And he won't be able to start until August. So that's not going to happen, is it? Tuchel has fallen out with almost every board he's ever been, at the board of every club he's ever been at. He's not a shrinking violet. He's not someone who's going to sit there and be told what to do by the likes of Jason Wilcox, nor is Ancelotti. So I don't know what sway Gary Neville has. Ruben Amorim name-checked him in a press conference and suggested maybe that the club was listening to him. He's part of the regeneration project. I think he's probably got a decent relationship with Jim Ratcliffe. I'm reading between the lines and speculating a little bit here, and I'm being a bit cynical. But, so is he a bit of a mouthpiece? If he is, and this is spin, or this is PR, or this is even subtle PR to be put out there by someone that's relatively reputable, it's utter nonsense. Because we're not getting either of those, and if we did, I'd question why. Man United, with owners who come in and wiped out the debt and have an unrelenting philosophy towards greatness and excellence and hold ridiculously high standards and expectations and put expert operators in every single position at the club and are prepared to buy a squad of brilliant players, they could go and get Ancelotti and they could go and get Tuchel. And even if it was a World Cup summer, maybe you take the hit a little bit and go, right, well, it's still, we want that person so badly we can get them. But we haven't got that. So it's just mind-blowing that he has suggested that those two would do the job. For what it's worth, do you know what I think they'll do? I think it's between, there's five. I think it's between De Zerbi, Iraola from Bournemouth, Glasner from Crystal Palace, Michael Carrick or Gareth Southgate. And I think I've probably done it in order. I think De Zerbi would be the favourite. I think they would be hugely misguided to bring in, sorry, someone just sent me a message. Hugely misguided to bring in someone like Glasner or Iraola because we can't give them the environment that they need. We're not builders of things. There isn't a settled environment for them to come into. There isn't an environment that supersedes the manager, that works and that's settled and that's happy and that where there's harmony amongst people. We're neither here nor there, United. We want someone to come in we want a head coach to come in and we want them to just be a head coach, but we also want them to lift everything like a manager would. That's my observation. And you can't have it both ways. What needs to be changed and what needs to lead to sustainable change around the atmosphere around the club is key people in key positions apart from the manager or head coach. Because if you're insisting it's a head coach that you bring in, the head coach's job is not to get the club on his back and he leads the charge. That's a manager's job, not a head coach's job. So make your minds up. You have to set the tone as the club. You have to set the atmosphere. And for me, as I've said before, the only way we achieve that is by getting rid of these owners. So you cannot ask Oliver Glasner to come in and tell him he's a head coach, so he's governed by you as the board, but make no changes environmentally or structurally in terms of the people that are making these types of decisions, but also say to him, you're a head coach, which means you do as we tell you to do, but I'll tell you what you have to do. You have to galvanise everybody. You have to sit in front of the press. You have to be the main man. You have to be charismatic. You have to take the shit from the fans. You have to be the biggest leader in the club, but do as you're told. That doesn't work. It's like the guy in The Guardian wrote an article a couple of weeks ago saying managers at Man United, head coaches at Man United, are like Deliveroo drivers. If they come and the food's wrong, they get the blame, but it's not their fault. But Deliveroo will be happy for them to get the blame. And that's what's going on at United. So Glasner and Iraola, I think they are two strong favourites in terms of from the club's perspective, but it's nonsensical. Carrick, as I've said before, could do all right and could get the job, and he's a United guy who knows the club, and I think that could happen. Southgate, I think, is less likely to happen because I think the club are aware of what an absolute shitstorm that would cause, and I think he knows that as well, and he's smart. And I've heard him say before, if you go into a club where the fans immediately don't like you and the players probably aren't bought in, you're pushing a boulder up a hill. He's not daft. I don't think that'll happen, although the Steve Holland thing has made people think it will. So for me, De Zerbi then is probably the favourite. For me, De Zerbi will do no better than Amorim or Ten Hag. Ten Hag did better than Amorim, so let's say I don't think he'll do any better than Ten Hag's second season. I think he could win a cup, but again, he's not a shrinking violet. It's all interesting stuff. I think the one thing about a managerial sacking is, as much as it's highlighted all the problems of the club, it certainly provokes a lot of conversation. I don't think I've ever done so much content as these last few weeks, but yeah, that watching Stick to Football really sort of made my ears prick up, and I thought that's an interesting thing to talk about because I think it's worth bringing to this. Let me know your thoughts as always. Nice one. Glazers out.